If you ever watched competitive Pokemon, towards the end of the Gen 7 meta, there was a Pokemon that ended up being quite essential to have on your team, as it was essentially the best support you could possibly put together. And while it's not confirmed, some information has been floating around that this Pokemon will be returning in Scarlet and Violet's DLC, and that Pokemon is Smeargle. Now, I'm not going to touch on the typing of Smeargle because it's a normal type. It's really nothing special in that department. But it does have some very interesting abilities, such as Own Tempo, which is the least useful of them most likely, Technician, which is typically a pretty good ability to have access to boost the power of moves that are below 60 base power, and Moody, which I know in the earlier stages of Gen 7's meta, Technician was the more common choice, but I think eventually they moved over to exclusively using Moody as a way to potentially give it some more bulk. Because if we look at those stats, it ain't great. Now, the speed stat's actually fine at 75, but this has among the lowest offensive stats in the game, outside of like Chansey's physical attack. The combined base stat of both attack and special attack is 40, literally lower than its special defense, which is already not great. It doesn't even have good bulk either, so it is incredibly squishy with incredibly bad offense, with a pretty basic typing and abilities that are fine, but don't work well with this stat distribution. But what made this Pokemon so capable is its only move that it can learn, called Sketch, which essentially lets you copy any move that another Pokemon can use. And once that move is copied, you get to keep it literally forever on that Smeargle. Why that matters is in a competitive format, you can literally take the best support moves of all of the good supports and put it on a single Pokemon using Sketch. So this Pokemon can have Fake Out, Follow Me, and Spore all put on a single Pokemon. That's what makes Smeargle so effective as a support, and potentially the best support possible, as long as it has access to strong support moves that it can copy. And that is what made it so strong in Gen 7's meta, and it was quite a common Pokemon, especially during the restricted legendary meta, because this Pokemon having next to no offense, it is most useful when it has a strong legendary Pokemon that it can support, which back in Gen 7 was Lunala, and I know if it were in Gen 8, which it was not, it would have been a great Pokemon to pair next to, say, Groudon or Zacian. Now, this can also copy offensive moves. The problem is, with 20 base stat on either offensive stat, you're really not getting much utility out of putting offensive moves on this. So it's essentially only good as a support because of that. But how would it work in Gen 9's meta? I think that really depends on which meta it shows up in. So if this Pokemon becomes legal before box legendaries do, I imagine it's going to be fairly useful and definitely annoying to deal with. But I don't think it will be quite as oppressive until the later stages where Smeargle can support a legendary Pokemon. Because right now, the best thing you could probably pair with it is maybe Fluttermane, if it were in the current meta. Which it would still be reasonably strong, but in the current meta, supports tend to need an offensive move. We've even seen in tournament play Pokemon such as Klefki, with obviously next to no special attack investment, getting knockouts with Dazzling Gleam. You'll also notice in tournament play that you don't see a lot of Murkrow, even though on ladder it is still a very popular Pokemon to run into. The reason being the supports right now either need to have some form of offense, or they need to have good defensive capabilities, such as high bulk and good defensive typing, which is why we often see Amoonguss right now as the primary support option. It has good bulk, has redirection and Spore, two of the things that Smeargle would most likely run, but it also has Pollen Puff and Regenerator as its ability, which is going to be much better suited for how the current meta plays than Moody would be on Smeargle. So while I think this Pokemon would be strong, you would definitely see it. It kind of has a similar issue that Grafaiai and Murkrow do, where they just don't have the bulk, and in Smeargle's case, doesn't have the offense to justify taking a slot in a lot of teams. Because a support that doesn't have an attack is really not that useful right now. So I think early on, this is actually not going to be an oppressive Pokemon in the slightest. And this is probably the last Pokemon you would want to terrestrialize on your team, given its very poor defensive stats. So it does not benefit well from the terrestrialize gimmick either. I think it will just be another one of those supports that you see. It might do a couple of fun things here and there, but as far as like high level ranked battles and tournament play, I really don't expect this would see much use until restricted legendaries become legal. And then we would probably start to see more utilization of it. But I doubt it will reach the level of oppression that it had in Gen 7's meta. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.